Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my lecture. So today we are going to talk about public goods and private goods. So different types of goods that we'll try to understand, especially the economic properties of every goods that we discuss. So let us first see, in public goods and private goods that we are going to talk about it today. Especially economic properties of the goods, where we know that some of the goods are solely provided by the government and some are provided by the government as well as privately. So say for example, national securities is the solely national security as a commodity or goods which is solely provided by the government, but educations or health, these are provided by the government as well as privately also can be availed. So two few assumptions, like few properties. The first property that we are talking about is rival consumptions versus non-rival consumptions. Is basically a good is used by one person, it cannot be say used by another. Like say any soft drink or beverage, if I buy and if I consume, then it can be used by only by me unless I offer, but then in general it can't be used by others. So it's basically rival consumptions. But at the same time, if we talk about community land or say community common properties where others are also allowed to use, so it's basically then the consumption that we'll talk about is basically non-rival consumptions. Then exclusion, the other the second important property is like exclusion. One, I mean, if it is public good, and if it is government provided, it cannot be, everyone will be included. It's not, one cannot be excluded by using that or by consuming that particular commodity. So we'll discuss much more in details about these two basic properties and try to understand how public goods can be defined and private goods can be defined. In fact, how pure public goods and impure public goods can be defined. So to move further, like let's see what is the definition. So if we consider these two definitions, two properties, the definition of public good could be that if it has the provided to one consumer, it is difficult or impossible to stop another from enjoying it too. So it is basically non-excludable property, and the amount of the good that I enjoy has no effect on the amount you enjoy from that particular commodity. Like for instance, if it is national park or say national highways, is basically non-rival, like everyone can use it. So I'm not talking about the price that you have to or we have to pay to use the public goods. That is a different thing and different aspect that we will be talking in details in terms of users fee. But then from the definition, it is clear the 2 points that I would like to highlight is like non-excludable and then non-rival. So these two property needs to be sort of understand when we talk about private or public goods. So pure and impure public goods there, these are the 4 points that I'd like to highlight. Is like pure public goods, like goods are perfectly non-rival in consumptions and perfectly non-excludable. And here I'm trying to bring national security, like defense, national defense. Non-rival in consumptions, like one individual's consumption of a good does not affect another's opportunity to consume the same commodity. Non-excludable, like individual cannot deny each other the opportunity to consume a good. And impure public good is basically goods that satisfy the two public goods conditions to some extent, but not fully. Like say public health, for instance, or say public education, like public educations. So we can't call is absolutely kind of perfect or pure public goods. So just have a quick sort of look at this particular matrix where we try to bring non-excludable and excludable versus non-rival and rival. So let's understand this matrix while talking about this public goods. So the first cell of this matrix is talks about non-excludable and non-rival. So means pure public goods, and national defense and public health, public educations can be taken as examples under this pure public goods. Now row 1 and column 2, like cell 1 and 2 is like non-excludable property, and rival is basically impure public goods like basic cable. Like for instance, everybody can say use the satellite, and then say any I mean one can take the example of say Doordarshan. So it is basically everybody has the right to kind of watch cricket or anything that are actually broadcasted by Doordarshan. But then if I want to have some more and for instance if I want to watch Star Sports, then certainly for that I have to buy some basic packages for watching that. But then definitely the cricket match is basically public goods. Like for instance, it's also been broadcasted by the Doordarshan, but then the moment I want to watch through Star Sports or other sports, private sports cable, then definitely it becomes not pure public goods. It is basically impure public goods. The other second property that like excludable, with excludable then we can also, the first discussion is like excludable and non-rival. Like again satellite can be taken as an example, and again it is not a pure public goods example. Like again here excludable properties coming, like not everybody will be sort of coming here. So it is excludable, like some are excluded to access this satellite. Then the other one is excludable and rival, right? The commodity that I want to use is basically, it is not inclusive, like one can be excluded based on the price. The rival, like of course in terms of providing that particular commodities, there are rivalries there in the market. Like for instance mobile, any sort of commodities like ice cream, Tata Sky, Netflix is basically it's a rival. There are rivals like Netflix or say Amazon Prime or say Tata Sky or local cable channels. But then here perfectly they are the rivals among the sort of service providers, and also excluded. It's not like all the people will be included. So now moving further, when we talk about public goods and then market failure, so if we want to talk about public say goods and try to link with the market failure, so consumption, like under consumptions and under supply will be there. Like say price, if it is free for instance, or if it is very low, then there for the suppliers that will be very demotivating factors or in this and disencouraging factors for the producers to produce, and therefore supply always will be under. And even in the consumptions also, like it will be under consumption. So this consumption and supply of the goods from that particular point, like public goods can actually lead to the market failure. Like price is very important here. So now when we are talking about paying for public goods and free riders problem, like we can actually pay a little bit more attentions here. Like we can take the example of say the point that I was talking about while defining public goods is like fees, excludable and non-excludable, and rival and non-rival. So here when we put the users like fees, so we can actually explain with the help of graphical illustration. Like price is measured along with the vertical axis and quantity measured along with the horizontal axis, and just see like this is the demand curve for say any commodity, and here public goods that I am considering like say toll. So here the price of the toll on, and then uh, so this is like QM, and QM is like optimum use of the quantity that we are measuring like A, B, and then say point B is giving optimum level of quantity, and OA is like optimum amount of the price of that particular commodity. Like suppose it is getting sort of equilibrium at point say small e, then quantity that that consume uh, for the toll, like here quantity is like number of say number of vehicles that they are plying on the road, and here say PE is a price, OPE is the optimum level of price. So that particular road can provide or can accommodate OQM amount or number of cars or the vehicles, but then due to some sort of um, price, like not just to avoid traffic congestions and also air pollutions. So it was decided that okay, total number of quantity will be sort of decided at OQE amount of quantity, and their price is like levied here like OPE amount. Then certainly quantity is not optimum here, so it's not getting optimum here, and therefore QE and QM amount of quantity is actually not used in public goods debate, and that is actually leading to market failure, because the moment payment structure is actually added here and then price has gone up, and therefore the moment we sort of users fees is implemented, then QM amount of quantity is actually getting excluded from that particular settings. So now moving further, like in public goods is basically the first point, which is very important, like private provision of public goods is like free rider problem that we face. Like when an investment, just an example, like has a personal cost but a common benefit, individuals will underinvest. It's like when it is common, and then when I know that somebody is already paying, then I'll try to enjoy the ride or enjoy that particular consuming that particular commodity. Is basically in public goods, it is always there is always the problem or kind of issues that we may be very careful at the time of policy framework, is like free rider problem that are associated with the public goods. Like if say in the public hospitals, if and public hospitals, the fees for everyone will be same, and even those who can actually afford services from the outside, even at the during the peak kind of during the crisis time as well, but then they will go to the public health sector or public hospitals. But then who can even afford, they can also will go, and then that can be regarded as like sort of free riders problem. It's not that they are not supposed to, but then even at the time of crisis, when poor people should be given more sort of priority, but then due to the non-excludability and non-rival characteristics, everyone will be treated equally. even those who can actually afford, they will actually enjoy that benefit. The second point, altruistic, like when individuals value the benefits and cost to others in making their consumption choice. So here again optimization comes here. And the third point is like the social value, social capital, the value of altruistic and communal behavior in the society, which actually decides collective consumptions of certain commodity, which is like public goods. So now public provision of the public goods, this particular points that we'll talk about even in details when we talk about macro economic indicators or components in defining public policy. The first one is crowd out, like when government decides that government provides like more public good, the private sector will provide less. So like this is like when in case of say fiscal policy and monetary policy, we know that with the expansionary fiscal policies, many private investors, they will crowd out from the sort of from the equilibrium points where IS investment savings and LM curve, they intersect. But here in this particular case, in the crowd out context, like if government decides that to produce certain commodity by themselves, then they will try to produce more and more, and which will lead private sector to out from the from the productions. So one is crowd out, the other one is contracting out. So publicly provided goods for which there is a large marginal cost associated with supplying additional individuals are referred to as publicly provided private goods. So in order to producing any goods or services, as we know that marginal cost is involved, along with of course the average cost. So here marginal cost means when we add one unit, so what will be the changes in the on the total cost. So that is the concept of marginal cost. And in this publicly provided goods for which there is large marginal cost means like including one additional or one extra amount of individuals will have more cost, and that is what large marginal cost that are associated with the publicly provided private goods. So now when we talk about supplying goods freely, especially distortions that are associated with that, let us actually understand that how we see. So here we'll just try to again we'll take the help of two diagram and then where we'll try to sort of explain like what is the distortion that we mean. So in say in panel A and here panel B, so price is determined on the vertical axis, and Q is quantity is determined on the horizontal axis in both the panel, like panel A and panel B. So suppose say panel A is talking about say water, which is very necessary, and say in B we can take say health, which can be provided by the government either or and privately as well. So here like say horizontal straight line is like say marginal cost. So now suppose demand curve is like this is one case, one demand curve, the other demand curve could be the other like this Q here. So at point say E is the equilibrium. In the first panel A, the demand curve is steeper for the public goods for instance, and then in panel B you can see that demand curve is elastic, is like changes in the price, then price of the public goods, then changes in the in the quantity of the goods will be higher. So in this case, equilibrium, because demand and marginal cost and average cost is considering as a curve of the supply curve, like say supply, and then this one is the demand curve. So at point E in both panel A and panel B is the equilibrium point where demand and supply intersecting each other. So at point E, so we are basically we are having optimum level of quantity like OQ amount, and then in panel B optimum level of quantity is like OQM amount. But then the welfare loss that we have, like it can reach up to, production could be can go up to QC, say QC amount, but then in the equilibrium, like since market is getting distorted here with say this steep or inelastic demand curve, like say for the goods those who are inelastic, say for the normal goods here is like water. So here the loss that that market is having due to this market distortion, so this is basically welfare loss. And then similarly you can see like for elastic, relatively elastic demand curve, so welfare loss that we get, the area that say we can consider like EQC and say A, and here EQCA. So in panel A, area EAQC is lower than area EAQC under panel B. So it is under panel A, and this one is under panel B. So here we can see that when public goods is becoming elastic and demand curve is becoming flatter for the commodity, then certainly the welfare loss is much higher as compared to necessity goods like here water, and water is, say, demand curve for the water is relatively steeper, is like inelastic. Now let's talk about the rationing devices for publicly provided private goods through transaction cost. So transaction cost becomes very important point of discussion in public goods discussion or public policy discussions as a whole. So what is transaction cost? Is like when transaction costs are sufficiently high, it may be more efficient to supply the goods publicly than to have the goods supplied by the private markets. Like let's take the again graphical illustration with the help of graphs. Like price is measured with the horizontal vertical axis, and quantity is determined by the horizontal axis. So like for instance, again we can say like this is the demand curve, and here is this is the cost, like say cost of production, and here is the quantity, like QM. So here of course this is like horizontal straight line which is perfectly elastic price or average marginal cost curve. And then if transaction cost goes up, so this amount, like say here P1 and here P2, and P1 P2 amount is the transaction cost. If transaction cost is added, then quantity will be reduced, like say Q2. So quantity for the commodity will be reduced from Qn to Q2 and price will go up. So it is basically, after adding the transaction cost, the commodity, the price of the public goods will be higher, and therefore quantity will be produced less, and therefore the losses that we get it, the entire this this triangle area, the entire shaded area, dotted area, so these are is actually we are not getting it, and this is a loss for the welfare, right? So now let's move, and then let's see how individual demand curve for public goods shapes like, and this is how we'll try to understand like what is the demand curve and supply curve for the public goods. Like say we can consider this point, like here two commodities, like say commodity like here private consumption of any commodity, like private consumption, like say we can take the example of say public health, and then on the horizontal axis we can say like consumption of public goods. So as we already know from the utility debate, say individual will derive its satisfactions over the from the consumption of any types of commodity, could be public goods as well. So it's through utility, and utility is measured through indifference curves, right? And then we try to find out the optimizations point, and here optimization point we get it from the budget constraint. Like an individual will try to maximize its utility deriving from that particular commodity as a given or subject to budget line. So like say here is like say budget line AB, and then say here utility, like say indifference curve IC1, and suppose this indifference curve shows the marginal rate of substitution between, or the ratio of the marginal utilities between private consumption of the commodity or consumption of the public goods. Like of course public the same commodity is privately consumed and publicly consumed. So that is that particular trade-off that we are trying to understand from this indifference curves, and it is getting optimized here at point say E. So now suppose public goods becomes cheaper, and then this budget line will be like sort of will become flatter, it's like elastic, and will move towards right hand side, and that is AB to AB star, and then indifference curve IC2, and here the next point that we get is F. Certainly from this point of view, like if price of the of public goods falls, then demand for public goods will increase, and therefore an individual will have in the higher indifference curves, which is like here clearly is like from IC1 to IC2. So this is what it happens. So what is a budget line here? So budget line is basically say we can derive like Y is in individual's income, C is like private consumptions of any commodity, plus here say price, small p is like say tax price for government for consuming public goods, like say here G, right? So if I can make this as equation 1, so it's basically P is tax rate and G is government expenditure. So certainly if government is spending more, tax rate will be higher, right? The price of consuming public goods will be higher, and therefore P and G, these two are positively or proportionately depending to each other. And C here is the consumption, private consumptions. So now if I draw the same, like here, if I plot against quantity, like say quantity for public goods, like here say quantity, like QG is quantity for public goods, and here price, like small p, like price rate. So at point E, like this much of consumption of public goods, like OG amount of consumption of the public goods one individual will have when price is at OP1 amount. So when price, tax rate is OP1, then for that particular commodity, like say health or education, OG amount of quantity of the public goods will be derived. So since price has fallen, then obviously quantity demanded has increased, like say from OG to quantity demand has increased since price has fallen. So quantity for public goods will increase from OG1 to OG2. Since price has already fallen, because we have seen this E to F is nothing, is basically total effect or say price effect, that we already know, which is certainly sum of income effect and substitution effect. And here, so since price has reduced from say P1 to P2, so here like say price has decreased from P1 to P2, but quantity demanded for public goods has increased from OG1 to OG2 because of the price effect. And then we get one combination here, like say point E1 and say point E2. So if we join E1 and E2, we get the demand curve for public goods. So public goods. So here demand for public goods, which is again downward sloping, and it has, it is coming from that price effect, and then the relation or the trade-off relationship between private consumptions and public consumption, consumptions of the public goods. So it's a trade-off between two commodities for the individual. So now efficient production for the public for public goods will be like say this is say collective demand. So in case of market demand, that we know that market demand is nothing, is basically horizontal summation of all individual demands. So here also, like individual, you will get individual demand curve for consuming public goods. So likewise we get collective demand curve for public goods, and this is like supply curve of the public goods, and here on the vertical axis is the price, and along with the horizontal axis is the quantity demanded for the public goods, and here is the equilibrium point where demand and supply for the public goods are intersecting, and then here is the equilibrium quantity and equilibrium price. So this is how efficient production for the public goods will will be there in the market. So I stop here, and these are the two books that I have used for this lecture as well. So please go through selected chapters from Joseph Stiglitz and Jonathan Gruber's. So thank you very much for your attentions, and I see you in my next class.